Hey, and welcome back. We've got my 1968 Volkswagen Fastback here behind me, and you probably noticed that we did a rear brake disc install on this a few weeks ago. I've been driving it since, and I've been very happy with its performance, not having any problems or any issues with it at all. The brake pedal sits up nice and high, it's nice and firm, and it stops great. But this is a follow-up because people have been asking, why didn't I install a rear brake pressure, what the hell is it called? Why didn't I install a rear brake residual pressure valve? I felt I didn't need it. In the other Volkswagens that I've owned in the past before that I put rear disc brakes on, I haven't used it there either, and the thing always stopped just fine. So I figured I'd go ahead and experiment today. So I picked up a rear disc brake 2 psi residual pressure valve with an extra piece of line, because that's what it's going to take to install this in line. Oops, we're showing a brand name here. We're not going to be showing brand names in future videos. That is going to be a video discussion in itself. We'll talk about that later, but no more brand names in my videos. But this is a residual pressure valve, and this is how it came to me, with no instructions or anything. I had to actually check some of the illustrations online of the people that are using these to find out what direction that this is supposed to go in, because it's a check valve by any other name, so which way do you do it? Turns out there's a little arrow right here, and that gets pointed towards the brakes themselves, whereas the other end goes to the master cylinder. This little sucker comes apart, and there's a spring and a few other little pieces in there, so don't take it apart. You probably don't want to lose them. Anyway, we're going to install this in line with the rear brakes. We're going to bleed them back out, and we're going to see just how much of a difference this little guy makes in the performance of those rear brakes.
I'm your king. Well, I didn't vote for you.
On the Type 3, it's relatively easy to get to the master cylinder. There's normally a cover that exists here. Unfortunately, it got lost on this car many years ago. I found a replacement for it since. I have to actually derust it, clean it up, and install it. So I haven't gotten that far yet. But normally there's a cover. It's about the size of my hand and sits right here. If you're working on a Beetle, you'd be probably taking off your driver's side front wheel and attacking it this way. But what we're going to do is we're going to pull it off over here. This is the line that goes to the rear brakes. It goes through the pan and out towards the back of the vehicle. I'm going to disconnect this here. This little sucker is going to attach in line. And then this line here, we're going to make a curly Q out of it, little piggy tail. It'll literally loop right back around and back into the master cylinder. First, we're going to have to grab us, I believe it's going to be an 11mm wrench. Pull this sucker out of here. And I might actually start forming this first, because this is going to leak. It's going to start draining brake fluid immediately. So you're going to want to have a pan up underneath this to collect any of the brake fluid that's coming out. You can always empty your brake fluid reservoir if you would like to, but if you move really fast, you can go ahead and swap all the parts out and not have to worry too much about it, and then just top it off before you bleed the brakes. So let's go ahead and get this installed. Well, I thought about it again, and it occurred to me that my gas tank is almost empty right now. So it's going to make a much better quality video if I just go ahead and remove the gas tank and attack the master cylinder from the top. You can get a much better video that way. Everything will be clearer and a lot less struggle for me as such a big guy that I am. Of course, you can remove the gas tank from a Type 1, a Karmann Ghia, pretty much any Type 1 based platform, or Type 3 to get to that master cylinder. Otherwise, you can remove the driver's side front wheel. That's another way to get into it. Alright, for gas tank removal, it's quite easy. There's 4 bolts all the way around the tank. They're all 13mm. There's also the breather tube, and there's the gas fill tube. So you have to remove the hose clamp from here, maybe 1 or 2 of these, all 4 of those bolts all the way around, and the tank should come up. Alright, we got us our 13mm wrench. Here we go. Now I see a lot of my friends do this, and this is a mistake they always make. They don't put these bolts and miscellaneous parts in a container. Instead, they put them under their own feet, and when they walk around, they kick things all over the place. When they go to put it back together, they're missing stuff. right. Alright, and the last thing we've got to do, we've got to remove the fuel gauge wire from the center. Put that up and out of the way where it's not going to get pinched or caught or broken on anything. And our gas tank is ready to come up and out. And I've always found that if you grab it and pull it towards you, levering it upwards, you get a good look at the fuel line underneath. And hopefully, whomever put it together last time gave you enough fuel line to be able to pull it up. Yep, we're good. I put enough fuel line on there to be able to do this. Alright, fuel line is removed. On a Fastback, there's the second outlet. And this is a carbureted car, but I use that anyway as a return line. It escapes the residual pressure from the fuel line when I turn the key off, so that way there's no pressure sitting in the carburetors, and they don't have a tendency to, it's weird that they do this, but they boil over, and they continue to have fuel feeding into the carburetor bowls from whatever residual pressure is left in that line. So I do use that line. Normally you wouldn't see that on a Beetle. Okay, here's our master cylinder. Here's that line that we're going to do the service on. We're going to pull this one out from here, detach it, and then we're going to put that residual brake pressure line in line with that right there. But before we do anything, we got to put a catch pan underneath here because it's going to leak. It's going to drain brake fluid out of it onto the ground. That's just sloppy, so you don't want to do that. Try to catch as much as you can. And we're going to have to work quickly because it's going to be draining the reservoir and it's all going to be leaking out. So you want to work as fast as you can, so don't pull this line off until you're ready. Okay, there's our pan. I can't remember if we're a 10 or an 11 millimeter, so I grabbed one of each. Now we're going to try to form this into the best curly-Q shape that I can. It's going to go in something like this here, and then this is going to loop up and around. Okay, I think that's going to do us. We're going to put it in here like this, and we're going to stretch our brake line, existing brake line, up and over to the other side of the blue piece. It's cute to know that this kit has 10 millimeter nuts on it, but the existing brake lines are 11. So actually I was right in grabbing two different size wrenches. Alright, I think we're in pretty good shape down here. Let's go ahead and get this line removed. This stuff should come apart pretty easily because I only put this stuff on new a couple years ago. It doesn't look too awfully corroded. It's dirty though. Car picked up a lot of dirt on it recently. Alright, I don't know if you can see it, but the brake fluid is leaking out, as I anticipated it would. Alright, this is where we got to start moving quickly. This is where the fluid is running out. Get this line snugged up. Looking in the reservoir, we barely lost any fluid actually. As I said before, to anybody with any experience doing this, you probably want to grab a turkey baster and just remove whatever brake fluid was in the reservoir that's just going to drip out anyway, and dispose of it wisely. Me, I work fast enough that I waste very little. Alright, looking good, looking good. Coming on in from the other side here. Adjust the camera so you can see a little bit better. Right there is the blue bit that I just added. You can see the little piggy tail. I'm going to get a couple of better angle shots of this in just a minute. But what I've got to do is I've got to bend that brake line that you see it's up here alongside the blue one, so that way it plugs right into the pressure adapter. Yeah, that required a little bit of strength because there wasn't a whole lot of leverage that I could put on there. Now there it is plugged in, just like you see. Going to tighten that up with my 11mm, and then we'll get these brakes bled. And it helps if I don't knock the camera over. Definitely need to use a suction cup next time and mount this sucker up underneath the hood. Lots of better ways to do it than what I'm doing right now. And the wrench falls in the bucket. And in the bucket again. Going to just put a little bend in the brake line to make sure that it's not vibrating against the chassis or any other part, because that's a recipe for disaster. It will vibrate a hole right through the line, and then you will be very, very unhappy. Just make sure that this is snug. Alright, I think we're good to go. Looking in the brake fluid reservoir, the level isn't really all that low. We didn't lose all that much. There's still enough on both sides that these brakes would still work adequately had we not have drained anything from it. But I'm going to go ahead and top it off above the full line. And we're going to do that on purpose because we're going to bleed out the rear brakes and make sure that everything has no air bubbles in it. And this car is real easy to do. We'll show you in a minute. This is probably the only time that it's okay to overfill. Put the cap on. And yes, you can leave the cap on. The cap does breathe. There's a little pinhole in it that lets the air out. Alright, and it's time to put the gas tank back in. right below here, on this side is where all the headlight wires and stuff is. And this can be a little tricky sometimes to get this up and out of the way, because when you put that tank down, you don't want to pinch it. Alright, that should get it where it goes. And under here, you've got the 2 fuel lines on the Type 3 anyway. And you have to make sure you get the right one in the right location. This one goes to the fuel pump. And that one's pretty obvious. And this, by the way, is also a good time to look at your fuel lines to see if there's any cracks in them or if they look weathered. Or if you haven't replaced them somewhat recently, as I have, it's a good time to change them out. Okay. That's one fuel line up. Let's go for the second one. This one's a little shorter than the other. A little trickier to get it on there. Just like that. Put your hose clamp up in place. Tighten her down. Okay. Now we're getting ready to lower this tank into position. This is where all of that wiring stuff comes into play. Sometimes it's easier if you can shimmy it into position, just like that. Actually, that fell right into place, and everything's up and out of the way. Now this filler over here, the rubber gogi that goes on there, this guy, I bought a real soft one when I replaced it last, and I did that on purpose. Alright, I put a real soft hose on here on purpose, because this can be really tricky to remove and reinstall. With a soft hose, it pretty much just flops into position. That's it. Make sure it goes on the whole way around the filler tube. And get ready to start tightening these screws back down. Tighten the screws on these hose clamps. Now, of course, if you had an earlier if you had an earlier Volkswagen, such as a Beetle or a Carmen Ghia, your fuel filler will actually be on the inside of the hood. It'll be away from this. You won't actually have a rubber tube to deal with. You will, however, have a breather. But I don't know if you have a big fat breather like this. It would be a little tube instead. That would probably attach way up over here in the front. But on the Fastback, we've got this one. Okay, we got our fuel gauge Cinder wire. This attaches right here in the middle. This is a non-energized ground wire. If it comes off and touches nothing, you get nothing on the gauge. If it comes off and touches ground, it'll show full. Okay, we're ready to put in our tank retainer clips, just like that. There's a washer and a bolt, 13 millimeter. And one goes in each corner. On a Beetle, they would be up in front, and it'd be in the back. The Type 3, though, everything's a little different on a Type 3. Okay, that should just about do it. This little tab bends down and holds all these wires and hoses and tubes and everything into place. think it's kind of a joke. It should have been a lot longer than that, but that's how it works, and that's what they provided way back in 1968. Okay, everything in here should be good. We're going to check the fuel gauge and make sure that it's showing minimal fuel, because of course I don't have that much in here right now. Alright, the fuel gauge is a little sticky on this, but it should come off the bottom where it's at. There it is. It is functional. Currently the fuel pump is running, you can hear it. We're going to check up front to see if there's any fuel leaks, and make sure there's none. And if that's all good, we can take this thing for a ride. Let's see just how well this brake install actually functions. Wow, I gotta admit, that pedal feels much more linear than it used to. Yeah, first impression of that pedal is definitely a good one. Brake pedal definitely feels much more firm than it used to. Alright, now we're backing up. I had to back up around one of my other cars here. And just backing down the hill, I feel the difference in the brake already. The pedal sits up much higher than it used to, and it requires a lot less push to make it work. Engine could use a little warming up before I took it out, but I think it'll be alright. Somebody with an RC car up there. Hope I don't run it over. Let's see, a speed bump here. Touch the brake. Oh yeah, they work. They work quite well. Runs his little car over. Wow, what was with the dirty look he gave me? Maybe he knew I was going to run him over. I wasn't really going to run him over, but sometimes you could just tell what somebody else is thinking, and that might have been the situation. Try these brakes out. Grippy, all right. Got a speed bump. Feels like the fronts are locking up before the backs did. Used to be more the opposite. I would have expected to have continued to have been that way, and maybe even the backs would have locked up a little more, but I have to find some softer gravel road or something someplace where I can look at my skid marks. The brakes are working really good because I've never seen the passenger seat come flying forward like that before. fact, everything that was under the seats is now up front. Well, undoubtedly, the brake pedal feels a lot better than it did. I don't know if the brakes are working better or not, though. I might have got a little fluid or something on the discs. And I had all that trouble bleeding them. I might have just sprayed a little fluid up there, which of course would make the discs a little more slippery. But the pedal feels just better. It definitely feels better. There's this much more clamping at a much smaller motion on the pedal. It doesn't take much. And if I'm pulling up the e-brake handle, I'm not feeling the rear brakes locking up. So yeah, I probably got a little bit of brake fluid on the discs. Probably should get under there with a little bit of brake parts cleaner and some acetone and just wipe the discs down. I think they'll be fine otherwise. Just drive it for a couple days like this even, and that stuff will just burn right off. Otherwise, I gotta say that pedal feels really good. As long as I'm not experiencing any more leaking up front from the part, which I'll check. But I suspect it's gonna be just fine. But I'll slip a piece of cardboard underneath it and just pump the crap out of it and see if anything drips out. If the cardboard gets wet, then I still have a problem, but I think it's okay. I think I found out what was wrong and fixed it. I'm going to call the residual pressure valve a thumbs up. I think it works well. Would I recommend it to other people? Yes. Would I say that you have to have it if you install rear disc brakes on a Fastback or a Type 3? I'll say no. I really don't think you have to have it. The brakes felt fine before without it. But do they feel better with it? Absolutely. Yes, they do feel better. So it's definitely a good upgrade, and yeah, I think it's worth the money. It wasn't expensive. You know, it was one of those less than $30 upgrades. So yes, I'd put it on another vehicle again. So everybody, thumbs up if you liked it, down if you don't. Subscribe if you enjoy my stuff. Hope to see you again. Thank you very much.